Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Vetacular. Today, I'm here with Bill Murray, the National Sales Manager for Bank of America's Veterinary Division. Thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Bill and I go way back. I met Bill when I was with IDEX, probably a decade ago at least.
Yeah,
And he's uh, he's one of the people that I go to for a trusted opinion about all things finance in the veterinary world. So I'm really happy that he's been able to join us here today. Um, so Bill, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I thought it would be great for you to just first of all go through what it is that a banker can do for a veterinary practice or a veterinarian more specifically.
absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. I've been with Bank of America off and on for a combined 23 years, 15 of which focused on veterinary lending. And there's a lot that we do for private practice veterinary clients, right? So we have products, lending products that allows for every stage of a veterinarian's career. So whether they are an associate considering ownership opportunities for the first time, either through the acquisition of an existing hospital, a buy-in, or a straight startup, and then as they grow in their ownership, whether they need to expand or renovate or buy real estate or relocate their practice, we have lending products all throughout that history of them being an owner. And then at the end, when they're ready to exit, if they're selling to another veterinarian, we can help connect with the practice broker network and make sure that we find the right buyer and get the financing to that buyer to acquire that practice and allow that veterinarian to exit, which we typically see from start to finish over a 20 to 30-year career. So it's been a great industry to be a part of. It's really fun, and we're happy to help support like a healthy and thriving veterinary industry.
Yeah, and it's an industry that's changed quite a bit over
Totally.
that
Yeah.
career, that 20-year career, right?
As
So
we age ourselves with how long we've known each other, right?
yeah, I think next year will be 20 years for me in the industry, and you've been there at least that long.
Yeah,
So if we rewind the clock and go back in time to when you started serving veterinarians in this
sure.
in this industry in this role, what was the world like then?
Absolutely. So it was around '05 that Bank of America, we had done some veterinary lending, but never really focused a specific division on it, right? We were very focused on dental healthcare lending and some medical lending, and we had done a few veterinary deals. And what we learned was that it was a really good industry to be in. The loans were very safe, just like most loans in the healthcare space. So we really wanted to dedicate some time, effort, and people to help grow that part of the business. And that was around '05. And I would say the most dramatic change from that moment to today's marketplace is the amount of consolidation and corporate
Sure.
consolidators that have picked up. But I would also say second to that, and probably 1A, 1B, is the changing technology and how the
Mhm.
technology and how practices have become more efficient when they introduce this new technology and services for their client base. So those two things are probably the biggest that stand out today.
Now, I think it's easy to, in hindsight, look at the consolidation wave that we've all seen
Sure.
over the last 20 years and say, boy, that was obvious. It was a fait accompli. It was going to happen. It
Sure.
had to because you had this wave of retiring baby boomers. You had enormous growth in the valuation of practices, throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
And boy, there was just no way that in 2012 that a practice owner who'd grown a practice up to a $5 million annual gross was going to be able to sell that to anyone other than a
Sure.
VC funded consolidator who could write a big check. Now, that all might be true to a certain extent. However, I think there's probably less understanding out there than you might think about some of the products that you guys offer for associates
Yeah.
to become vested early on, especially for those practice owners who might want their practice to stay independent after they retire. Can you talk a
Sure.
little bit about like what's on the menu there and what's available?
Yeah, we speak a lot about this because I think if you were to listen to, I call it, noise, but it's marketing, like the marketing efforts of some of those larger consolidators, if you listen to them speak, you would think that the entire industry was consolidating. and that
Right.
you couldn't
Yeah.
survive as an independent practice owner. And that's just not the case. I mean, we are putting on an annual basis 350 to 400 million dollars to work, and we focus solely on private practitioners. So there's a I think a space for both corporate owned practices, but there's also a very large healthy space for veterinarian owned private practices, and we continue to lend into that space on an annual basis. We've done over $1 billion in loans to private practice veterinarians in the last 4 years. So, I think that's probably one of the myths that's out there, that, there is no opportunity for an associate to become an owner. They have to go work for a corporate practice. And I think that I would prefer it to be a more mixed message where, hey, there's this really great path and opportunity down in the corporate space, but there's also this really great path and opportunity in the private space. And that's a message that we try to send at Bank of America often, because we are doing a lot of loans to first-time practice owners, and we're also helping some of our existing clients and new clients to the bank that have owned their practice for 10 or 15 years to prepare themselves for their exit. And sometimes that exit is to corporate, sometimes that exit is to a private practice owner.
Okay, so if I'm a practice owner today, let's say I've got two associates that work for me, and one of them I think is a long-term member of the team, and I want to explore how I might be able to have give them an option to buy into the practice essentially.
Sure.
Is that something that I come to like B of A about, or is that like a broker conversation or an attorney conversation?
All three, right? It's all
Okay.
three. And it's funny, we will see those conversations with owners very early, especially if they are a client of ours. So we might be the
Mhm.
first phone call. An attorney might be the first phone call, or a CPA or practice broker for an evaluation might be the first phone call. But it usually, one of those three calls happens, and they are going to happen at some point. You are going to talk to, most likely, someone to do an evaluation. You're going to talk to an attorney, and you and your buyer will absolutely talk to a banker, because when you're doing a buy-in, there is some complexity to that, because the practice has a relationship most likely with a bank already. If I'm a new bank coming in, we have to really coordinate with that current bank and the current owner's financials to make sure that we can get into what we need to get into in order to provide the loan. So we're certainly one of those phone calls, but getting an evaluation done, we always try to make sure we're pushing our clients to say, hey, we don't evaluate practices, we lend to practices. If you want a true evaluation, go to a practice transition specialist, go to an accounting firm that focuses on veterinary medicine, and get that done first. That way it kind of level sets, like, okay, what is my practice really worth? Because sometimes buyers and sellers have a very different idea of the value of that business.
Right. Okay, so let's turn that situation around. Let's
Sure.
say I'm an associate at a practice, and the owner's been very clear that he's going to sell to a corporate group,
Sure.
and that's great for him and a lot of the rest of the staff. But personally, I don't want to work for a corporate group. I want to work for an independent practice, and I've been thinking about maybe hanging a shingle myself.
Totally.
But there's this little voice in my head that says you can't afford to do that. You don't have enough cash. You don't have enough financial backing. It's never going to work. What realistically, what does uh, a veterinarian need in order to be able to start a practice? And I know that that's like a how long is a piece
Yeah,
of string
sure.
kind of a question, but
But it's actually not, because it's pretty straightforward. And I think most associate veterinarians get surprised when they realize how much capital is available to them to start or buy a practice, and it's really not that complicated. Um, Most of them have anxiety around their amount of student loans, right? It's most likely at that point in their career the largest amount of debt that they carry, unless they've bought a home, right? So
Mhm.
if I'm an associate veterinarian, I'm 7 years in, I probably have somewhere between 175 to $250,000 left on my student loans. And if you're working with a lender that understands the industry, we're not afraid of that. As long
Mhm.
as you're managing those payments the right way, if you've refinanced them, you're thinking about payments versus getting the best interest rate, and you've managed your debt, like, in a way that was viable for you from a monthly payment perspective, that's a good thing. And then if you have a little cash saved, you got a rainy day fund, you've been focused on your production, your clinical ability is up. you're going to get a loan. And whether it's from Bank of America or one of our friendly competitors, there are a lot of lenders that want to do this business. Some, everyone's got their opinions on some are better than others. But at the end of the day, if you want to buy a practice, you're going to find money, regardless of what you look like.
That's great to hear, especially around the loan piece. There is, a
Sure.
lot of anxiety around that. So today, when clients come to you and they're looking to, finance something, what are those somethings that they want to invest in? What are you seeing as the kind of the hot trends?
Totally. So obviously, with the digital radiography market really being subsidized by a lot of the lab companies, right, that are out there. I think you might have worked for
Yeah.
one back in the past. So they're looking at other. There's kind of two things that are of concern right now. One is what technology can help me become more efficient or make me, or maybe both, make a little bit more money in my practice, right? What's going to
Yeah.
create some efficiency where I can get some money out of that? Or is there a new procedure or some type of tool available to me where I can introduce it to my client base? It'll be accepted and I'll make a little bit more money there. So there's the revenue generating ideas. And
Right.
then there's the risk, right? The risk generated idea. And I think right now, I know you're at Cubex. Like, one of the things that I think is out there today is how you're managing your drug and pharmacies inside your practice. And you never want to be that practice that has the issue and thinks about it after the fact. So we
Yeah.
do have a lot of clients, especially with some of the news stories coming out there and some of the talk about how holding veterinary practices accountable for how they're managing their drugs and how those drugs are being used in the practice itself. We are seeing a lot more interest in smart cabinets, Cubex being one of them, and how they go about making sure that they're taking risk away from the practice and not have that day where they get a knock on the door because someone
Yeah.
stole some pharmaceuticals out of their practice.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And certainly, we've talked about, we've seen that in our business with
Totally.
the growth that we've had,
Yeah.
especially since the pandemic. But there's also, a sort of a concurrent trend that we've seen, which is really maximizing revenue generation per square foot
Yeah.
and looking at how do we get more square footage. So do you have, do you have clients that sit down with you guys and say, look, we're just out of space, and here's the ROI if we add another, 2,000 square feet, we can
Sure.
do X, Y, Z.
If they have the land, that's absolutely a conversation they have. But it's funny, what we see more of is that doctor that started a practice in a lease space. They're
Mhm.
7 to 10 years into that lease, and they're busting at the seams. And they find a building down the block or within the same town, and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm in my
Uh-huh.
2,000 square foot lease space, and now it's time to go to that 6,000 square foot, full facility, full
Yeah.
hospital to be able to do all the things that I know I need to do. So more so than not, our startup doctors that started with us 5, 7, 10 years ago are now coming to us and saying, hey, I'm moving down the block. I'm not going to re-sign this lease, and I need a couple $1 million to go ahead and do this. And we're saying yes to that a lot of the times, because those are usually those healthy, thriving practices that being able to grow is their number one problem because they're busting at the seams. I mean, those are great problems to have as a business owner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
We wind up in a lot of those same conversations, which is,
Absolutely.
is
Yeah.
why we wound up bumping into each other at the meeting down in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Uh, you know, those are a lot easier conversations to have when we're in the planning stages,
Sure.
rather than we've been here for 18 months. We've realized we need to do, we need to have smart inventory cabinets. We just spent, I don't even want to know how much on these beautiful, mid-mark cabinets all over the
Sure.
hospital. And now we're going to have to rip a couple of them out because we want to put, Cubex stuff there.
Yeah, we try
Um,
to make sure that, like, that's another thing. Like, our team at B of A, we're bankers, but we're not just bankers. So we try to make sure that we are advocating for our clients and surrounding them with good people, good businesses, good companies, so that way when they make a decision, it's the right one. And I think, an introduction to Cubex makes a lot of sense. Midmark does a phenomenal job on a lot of the equipment that they sell, but there's certainly a place, I think, for both to be involved
yeah.
in a practice. And the smart cabinet is certainly the wave of the future. You guys are doing a great job, and it really is providing a service to clients to kind of take some risk off the books.
Yeah, and this is something, that we talk to our own customers about. You're still going to need the mid-mark guy.
Right. That's
Like,
right.
like
That's right.
Cubex is not going to do the what every single countertop in your
Totally.
practice like they will. But there are probably going to be a couple of segments, especially in the pharmacy,
That's
where a Cubex smart cabinet's going to be higher capacity, and obviously it's going to have all of the connectivity benefits and security benefits that go along with it.
right.
So it's best to plan the cabinetry sort of in tandem rather than
Absolutely.
put it all in and then rip some out. So, if we like think about the future and some of the trends that we've seen, especially sort of in light of the macroeconomic environment that we're in with rising interest rates, money's more expensive. Where do you think we're headed from here over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Absolutely. So, further technology, I think on the veterinary medicine side, I think telemedicine is starting to be introduced a lot more so they can pre-vet, animals coming into the practice so they can see, okay, who needs to be seen right away versus who might be able to wait 24 hours if I've got a full book in my schedule. And then as far as the macroeconomic environment, I mean, you hear the word recession, everyone freaks out and it gets scared. And it's true, but the demand for veterinary services has never been greater. There is a true shortage of veterinarians in the United States today.
Yeah.
That is for certain. So if you were to ever be in an industry or be a doctor in an industry, veterinary medicine would be, as you go through a recession, would be a very safe place to be. Should you be aware of the macroeconomic factors affecting? Absolutely. I'm not telling anyone to go jump into the deep end of the pool and do a startup today. But if you do it the right way and surround yourself with people that understand what you're trying to accomplish, you should be able to get through any period of whether it's shooting through the sky or kind of coming back down to earth. You should be able to perform through those cycles. And as far as the interest rates go, that's like everyone talks about interest rates. I mean, I'm a banker. I talk about interest rates all day long. I like to put that in perspective. 2008, only 14, 15 years ago, we were selling loans at 9 to 10%. Right. So 15 years ago, if you were a veterinarian trying to get a loan to start up a practice, if you were at 8.99 to 9.49%, that was considered a good rate in those times. In today's world, even in this rising rate environment, we're still around 5%. So we're still much
That's
better than where
bananas.
we were 10 or 15 years ago. So when you kind of put that in perspective, and all those doctors that got those 9% loans 15 years ago, they're all doing quite well.
Uh,
Like, it didn't fail, right?
that was a good move by and
Yeah,
large, starting
a
that
very good.
practice in
Most
2008.
of them
Yeah.
are on their boats right now because they sold the
Yeah.
port, right?
Yeah. Right.
In the last 2 years, not this year, but last year, the
Yeah.
year before.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's and some of that's time value of money and growth, right?
That's right.
Like it's interesting. I think a lot of people have had this experience. That like the house across the street from us just sold for, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much.
Yeah,
We actually bought our house right around that time, 2008. And so it's that time value growth is hard to replace, even if the rate's a little higher.
that's right.
Um, you
And
know,
this is a moment in time. I mean, if you talk to people that got loans 6 years ago, most of them refinanced over the last 2 years
right.
as rates were at historic lows. So it's not like if you get a loan, you're never going to have an ability to potentially, if the market does change, refinance that and get a better deal as you
Yeah.
go on. But if the interest rate is what's scaring you from either starting or beginning a business, then you probably have to have a conversation with some advisors and really get yourself in touch with people who will tell you, like, hey, don't be afraid of an interest rate. If you're that focused on interest rates, you're probably not focused on the right things. We need to get you with people to make sure you are going down the right path and making good decisions. But
Yeah, it's a great.
it certainly is a factor, right? It's certainly a factor.
Yeah, it's a great point, Bill. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today.
Appreciate it.
What should somebody listening to this or watching this, what should they do if they're like, oh, I got to talk to that Bill Murray guy about getting a loan for my practice?
Yeah, you can certainly check out Bank of America's Practice Solutions division at our website, bankofamerica.com/practice solutions. And then you can reach me on my email. It's very easy, bill.murray@bofa.com. So
Great.
bofa.com. And I'm happy to talk to anyone that's even considering investing in their practice or investing in themselves and becoming an owner. And it's been a great conversation today, and I appreciated you having me in.
Great, terrific. Well, thanks, Bill, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from some more clients in the near future. Hopefully, some from this show.
That's right. I'll see you at the next trade show.
Great. All right. Take it easy, Bill.
Thanks so much.